Well, my name is Mike. I own locksmithvideoschool.com. I want to thank you for watching today's podcast. Today's podcast is probably going to be a little bit longer than some of our others, simply because I want you to learn how to make more money. I mean, isn't that why we're in the business? There's a tool that is made by HPC, and it's called the Cylinder Tap and Die Set. Here's what usually happens. A locksmith walks up to a door and he sees teeth mark on the outside of the cylinder. Right then, if he's been in business long enough, he knows that that cylinder has probably been stripped, and then the other locksmith that came in behind it actually wrenched the cylinder and cross-threaded the lock itself. Well, when you're looking at the invoice and your profit margin in this business, if you are one of these kind of guys that go, well, just pitch it, put a new one on there, write them a $500-600 ticket and go on down the road. Here's what you've done. Number one, you've lost money. You say, well, hi, I got a $600 ticket. Yeah, but they're not going to call you again, I can guarantee you, because if they've ever had any other work done by a locksmith that knows what he's doing, he has done it a lot for less money, but it's the profit margin that we're looking at. So you got the cost of the cylinder, you got the cost of the lock, that's money that you had to spend. When you look at the bottom line, if you would have had this tool on your truck, you could have repaired the lock itself, retapped it, re-dyed it, the cylinder, and put it back together and wrote them a $250 ticket, and that would have been all profit, absolutely all profit. Now the cost of this tool, and in a second here, what we're going to do is we're going to actually get down on one of these cylinders and we're going to do a no-no. I'm going to have to move the camera to do it, but I'm going to strip it and I'm actually going to repair the cylinder and teach you how to do that. But your tap and die set, I have seen these on the internet for as high as $350, some ridiculous amount of money like that. I've seen them for $260. If you go to lockpicks.com, right there on your screen, lockpicks.com, and you can ask for Damon or Barrett or anybody that answers the phone, tell them you want a HPC cylinder tap and die set. You know how much? I think it was like $176 or $179, something like that. Well worth every penny. You will make that just about on one job to pay for the tool. So it's a good tool. It's well worth the money. So HPC manufactures lockpicks, a whole host of other products, but they do have a sample video of this tool, and I'd like us to watch that here for just a second, and then I'll be right back and we'll actually destroy a lock. That's the most fun part, right? And I'll see you as soon as we watch this video from HPC.
Sometimes there's just nothing as frustrating as a stripped mortise cylinder or a stripped mortise cylinder lock case. When mortise cylinders and lock cases are new, they screw together without a problem. Oftentimes, a mortise cylinder is forced out of a lock without loosening the retaining screw. Other times, an inexperienced person will force a mortise cylinder into a lock crooked. These actions result in stripping the threads of the cylinder or the lock case itself. The HPC mortise cylinder lock tap and die set was designed to repair this type of damage. The tap can be easily twisted into a stripped lock case, cutting new usable threads into an otherwise ruined lock, while the holding fixture secures a stripped mortise cylinder in your vise while you use the die to repair the threads. The cylinder tap is very easy to use. Place the lock case in a vise if it's not on the door. Put several drops of oil on the cylinder threads. Turn the tap straight into the cylinder hole and turn 1/2 turn counterclockwise. While carefully holding the tap straight, turn clockwise slowly, and the tap will rethread the stripped or worn cylinder hole. To fix a worn or stripped cylinder, you'll need the cylinder die and holder. Place the mortise cylinder through the holder hole until the holder butts up against the cylinder neck. Tighten the vise jaws against the side flats of the holder to grip the cylinder securely. Put several drops of oil on the cylinder threads. Place the die on the cylinder and begin to recut the threads. The die must be started straight or cross threads will result. The HPC mortise cylinder lock, tap, and die set is available from your authorized HPC distributor. Ask for number CLTD5, the HPC mortise cylinder lock, tap, and die set.
Well, welcome back. I hope that you enjoyed that short clip there. They didn't go into a lot of detail, but that's what we're getting ready to do when I move these cameras around in tapping and dyeing. But has anybody's mind ever wandered while you were watching something? I was thinking about something while I was watching that, and that is what costs the guy money and what makes the guy money. I hope that through these podcasts that you learn a little bit more than just what the particular subject is about, which is going to be about that tap and die set. But what costs you money? And usually guys will learn this after years in the business. They'll start out really strong and they'll start making a lot of money. And the next thing you know, Mag Hike, whatever the name of the company is, doesn't call you anymore. I mean, you call them and go, hey, Susie, what's going on? I haven't heard from you in a while. Her response is going to be, well, we've just been slow, blah, blah, blah. But here's probably the reason that they didn't call you back. When you install something on a door, learning to tap and die is probably one of the most critical skills that you need to know. Because here's a scenario for you. She called you out to a back door of an office building, and it was a steel door, and they wanted to put an exit device because the lever handle that they had on the back door, people will shove on that lever handle, and eventually the lever handle will give loose, and that fire department comes along and goes, no, we got to have a panic exit device on this door with an outside key with a pull handle on the outside of the door. Okay, all's well and good. So you go to the supply house and you price it out. You're going to pay, depends on what kind of hardware that you want to put on there, but let's just use an arbitrary figure of $700, right? So the panic bar ends up costing you $300, and you charge them $795 for the panic bar, which we do. Okay, so there's what, 200 and some change profit for you right there. So you put the panic bar on the door. Now, you're in a hurry, you're going to do it the easy way, and what you're going to do is you're going to use self-tapping screws. And we're going to look at some, and I'm going to show you why they're not a good choice. But you use self-tapping screws, so you put the self-tapping screws in there, and 3 weeks later, that same door that gets all that traffic, that panic bar starts getting loose on the door. Well, she calls you back. And the maintenance guy happens to be there because he's the one that took you down there and showed you the door. Well, he's standing around watching you do it. If he is worth his salt as a maintenance engineer, he's going to know that if you would have tapped those screw holes that hold that panic device on that door, it wouldn't have fallen off the door. So you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to take it off and find an oversized tap, and you're going to tap it and put it in properly and use some Loctite and Loctite the screws down, and it'll be done the right way, or you're going to use what's called sex bolts, which we're going to look at, and you're going to put them in the door that way to keep it from actually falling off the door. Well, here's what happens. Bob, the maintenance guy, goes back up to Susie and says, man, I'll tell you what, that locksmith, that guy's he's not very mechanically adept. I think we should look for somebody else. And along comes Frank, who's a brand new locksmith. You know, he took our course, he learned how to do these things, and he puts the panic bar on there, he puts it on there right, and the thing stays on there. Well, so here you are. The next thing you know, she's not calling you, so you're making that phone call. And she just says there's not any business, they've been slow, blah, blah, blah. Truth of the matter is they're using somebody else. So your net at the end of the year, you're looking at, you made $157,000 last year. Now, locksmiths make that kind of money. Don't kid yourself. $176,000 last year, but this year, you lost almost $75,000. Well, where did that money go? Is the economy bad? It's not the economy, it's the craftsmanship that you've been putting into the accounts that you have. So it's important that you learn how to tap and die and install hardware. So this course may be a little mundane to some of you, but maybe that rang a bell with one of you guys that you've seen your income drop, and that may very well be the reason, because you don't know what you lose when you lose it a lot of times. you know what I mean, money that goes out the window, you just don't know why. But that could very well be the problem. So I thought I would just drop that tidbit in there. Like I said before, these podcasts, I hope that you pick up more than just what we're actually going to be working on as a tip for you to help you get into the business. That's why I have a whole section on marketing in the business. That's very, very important, and we talk about some of this in that section. But anyways, we're going to move all these cameras around, and we'll get right down to the topic of the HPC cylinder tap and die set. And we're going to talk about self-tappers and sex bolts and all this other kind of good stuff, right? Sex always sells, right? Okay, so we'll see you in just a few minutes. Well, welcome back. We got all these cameras moved around. I let my wife watch that first section. She said, "Oh, you said the word sex." And I go, "Well, whatever." She knows I'm nuts. She's been with me 25 years. No big deal. But anyways, in order to install something on a door, you need to have a good understanding about tapping, because before we actually tear into this mortise section, Adam's Right mortise section with this tap and die set, I wanted to go ahead and go through the process of tapping something for you newer guys, because you may not know some of the things we're going to talk about, or you've been doing it a while, you might pick up something that you didn't know. What you're looking at here is actually a tap. Hopefully that will focus for you. These cameras, whatever. All right, so you can see it has teeth on both sides. When you tap something and rock it back and forth, I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to drill a hole in here, and I'm going to, first of all, let's say that I actually went into my toolbox, which a lot of us do, and we find a tap. And we don't have any idea what size holes should I start with in order to get this properly sized. I carry this in my truck and use it for a lot of different reasons, but you notice these burn marks. I'm going to tell you about those in just a second. But if you will take the tap that you've got and stick it through these holes, you will eventually come up with the right one, which is that one right there. If you'll notice the threads that are left on the other side, that's about right if you're going to be doing steel. I have noticed on new taps, I've got a new one, excuse me for stepping in front of you, I've got a new one here, and it comes with the proper drill size, stated proper drill size, as well as the tap itself. When you're tapping aluminum, I usually will go a little bit, the hole size a little bit smaller. Why? Because it makes more threads within the aluminum, and the threads are deeper, and it's not as hard. But let me just caution you on steel. If you break a tap off in a steel door, it's usually going to break off right about there. And all you're going to have is a steel tap sticking out of a steel hole on a steel door, and getting that out of there can be a nightmare next to none. And the only reason that you would break it off is that you don't properly tap it the way I'm going to show you to do right now. I'm going to go ahead and drill this tap. Now the hole that we're tapping in this aluminum is the exact same size hole that is right here. It's an 832 thread, and it is the number 26 or 29, I believe it is. Most of your taps will have it on the side. It says this is an 832, and it's a number 29 drill bit, which is exactly what I've got here. But a lot of times I have other taps that don't give you the drill size. So that's what I use this particular piece of metal for, is I will put the tap in there to actually see what size drill I should. And this actually is not metrics, so you will find that this is actually a 9/64, which is a little bit smaller. So let's go ahead and we're going to actually drill this, and I'm going to tap this for you. Now I chose aluminum because it's just a lot easier to do on video. Steel can be quite challenging, but the principle, if you'll really look at a tap, it's actually almost like two chisels that when it cuts like this on both sides. You see a little channel in here that actually picks up the extra metal, but when you stick that through there, see, I can feel it on the other side. It's probably less than, I would say, a 64th, 32nd of an inch sticking out on the other side. But the way I do it, the tap needs to be completely straight. Usually, let me back up here. Sometimes if I'm doing aluminum, this is why I didn't think to mention this, you take a little bit of 3-in-1 oil and you just get it on your tap. A lot of times if I'm doing steel, a steel door, I will actually use like bearing grease and actually coat the tap in bearing grease. Some guys don't like to do that because they say it messes up their little hands, but you know how it is. But anyways, let's go ahead and I'm going to start this, and I want you to watch how I do this. You start the tap straight and you turn it until you start to feel some resistance in your tap. Now remember, there's little channels in this tap, so I can turn it, and now I'm going to go back and forth like this. Why? Because it's actually cutting on both sides and it's filling up that groove with metal. Now when you're doing metal, you actually want to pull the tap out. Now I can feel quite a bit of pressure on it right now. If this was steel, be careful. Do not break a tap off in a steel door. If you do, it is a nightmare to get it out. We're going to rock it back and forth, screw it in back and forth. All of this, you need to know how to do this if you're even going to be able to use this tool properly. So I'm back and forth. Take one more turn, back and forth. It's turning pretty tight right now. I don't want to go all the way because I don't want to break the tap off. I know I won't break it off in this aluminum, but if this was steel, I would be very, very careful. So what we're going to do is we're going to back it out and just make sure that the threads are good and cut, and back it out and unscrew it. Now if you look at this tap, you're going to be able to see the aluminum shavings where they get caught in the channel, these little cutting channels. You see that? I guess you can see that probably. It's pretty hard. These autofocus cameras can be kind of a nightmare, but you kind of get the idea. All right, so let's take a set screw from an Adams right lock, which we're going to be looking at here in a second, and we're going to screw it into this hole that we just freshly tapped. And it screws. I can feel a little that it's tight, which is what you want, and there you go. Now you notice the burn mark on the drill bit sizer plate that I have. You can find these, pretty much any hardware store has them. Most of them are plastic. You don't want one that's plastic, and I'm going to show you why here in a second. We talked about, or we're going to talk about, or earlier we talked about tapping and using what is called a sex bolt like this right here. This would be done on like a panic device. Instead of tapping into the steel door, you would actually come through from the other side, and you would, that's another thing I use this for, is to stick this in here and find out, okay, what size would I need, would be right there. Because you see those teeth on the other side that keeps that from actually turning. I would actually drill a 3/8 inch hole on the outside coming in, and then take my sex bolt and put some Loctite on this and screw it into the door like that, and that will pull it up. It'll actually pull it up tight, and that's what you use sex bolts for. But you're wondering, what are the burn marks on here? Well, if a guy has come in, and I've seen this a lot, they will use Loctite, but they'll use the type of Loctite that is heat. It takes heat. You have to apply heat to it in order to even break it loose. Well, I don't personally, I don't buy that kind of Loctite, but I have run into it. So what I did was I took this particular tool and I put it up against the bolt like this, and I took a little torch and I heated up the bolt. Then I removed it. It made the bolt hot, but it didn't screw up the finish of the door or destroy the door in any way, or because if you just put a torch on that, you're going to burn everything else around it. So that's a pretty good idea, right? So you older locksmiths that are watching us, that's a little tip for you. But that's what I use that for. So now let's go ahead and we're going to start talking about fasteners. Okay, fasteners. Let's talk about several different types of fasteners. Everybody and their brother has seen this type of a fastener. I do not like them. You'd say, well, we're locksmiths. We're dealing with metal. Well, why would I need to fasten something to a sheetrock or to a wall? Well, several reasons. You could have a buzzer switch for a mag lock that's attached to the front door of a business, and you've got to connect that buzzer switch to the wall. You can either use, you can hopefully use a stud finder and find a stud, or you'll use one of these types of fasteners. This particular kind of fastener, I don't really like them because when you drive them in, when you start to tighten them up, sometimes they'll spin on you anyways, so that's probably not a good choice. The other one is this right here, which we don't like, right? I hate these things, but they do work. You drive it into the sheetrock, you drill a hole into the sheetrock, put this in there, and then as you tighten this down, this spreads out and holds this to the wall, and you would use that for the buzzer switch. The other thing that you would use these type of fasteners for would be, let's say that the customer asks you to install a key cabinet, and it's got to go on a wall in a closet somewhere. There you go. Now, the other type of fastener is the sex bolt, which we have already talked about. And then you have, of course, the best way to attach something to a door is to actually tap the door. If it is a steel door, tap it and put your screws in that way. Now, as far as fasteners go, when you use the term fastener, usually they're talking about bolts. This came out of one of my newest vans. Actually, we have a new video coming out on it. We just built a brand new van. The inside is really cool. But anyways, we bought these, and they come in a tray of, I think there's 4 or 5 of these. And when you open it up, what you have inside is magic. Guys are weird about stuff like this. You know what I mean? Like little toys. Anyways, they're fasteners, and I have all of my different size fastener. Every fastener that I have in here, I have a matching tap and die set for them to where I can use them in multiple different ways, your bolts. And so that's your fasteners. So now, let's get into the main part of this video where we're going to be talking about the magical tool right here that can make you money. Alrighty, this is your HPC tap and die set, which we've been talking about this whole video. But before we go into this, we're getting there. Before we go into this, I want to talk to you about what this tool is made for. It's made to repair the threads in your standard Adams Wright lock. Now, if you look at this image here, this is your standard door that you see on every single shop and across the United States. They're all exact, probably 99.9999% of all of the storefronts in the United States look just like this right here. But this is your Adams Wright lock that was in that particular door. They come in 2 different back sets. They come in a 31/32, which is what this is that I'm holding in my hand. And that is the distance between the edge of the door and the center post where the cylinder goes in. This is a 31/32. It's going to have a very short, what we're calling set screw, which goes in the side here. The other one is the 1 1/8, which is the one that I have attached to the vise here. And yes, I'm going to take one for the team. I'm going to actually break the set screw on this brand new lock so you can see what this tool repairs and the reason that you would need to repair it. Most guys, if you walk up to a door and you either can't get this lock picked, one way that you can gain entry to these locks is to actually break the set screw. Now, if you look at this and see the way that it works, the way an Adams Wright lock works, and most of you guys know this, but the ones that you don't, you need to see it anyways. It has a cam, which is on the back of your cylinder like that, and it pushes down and actually throws the bolt, which is exactly what happens when you stick the key in here. And that's the purpose of the groove in the side of your mortise cylinder, is so that you line it up properly and the cam is properly lined up. And what I have seen, I'll caution you on this, this is getting off the subject again, but I'm good at that. If you screw the cylinder in and you don't hit this channel, and this, what can happen is this will go around and it'll go all the way around, and the key will slip past there and the bolt will be actually like that. And you'll think that you've actually fixed it and it's working. Works fine, it locks. And then along that evening, they come along and they lock the door and they jiggle it to make sure it's locked, and that happens. And that's the purpose of this stop on the side of this, that you see that the roller pin goes up into there, that keeps that bolt to where it's locked into place. So anyways, let's get right down to it, and I'm going to do the very thing that gives me chills. I'm going to break this set screw and open this lock. So let's go ahead and lock the door. You'd say, well, Mike, in your course you go into great detail on lock picking. That's exactly why in my course that I go into great detail, so you don't have to do this. Because if it's a real high security cylinder and you can't get it picked, you have the choice of either drilling it, which I showed you in my course. If you've already taken my course, we show you how to do that. But the bottom line is, if you can't, if you don't want to drill it, you can break the set screw, which a lot of guys do. So you take a pair of channel locks and you bite down on this. Hopefully this won't jiggle around in this vise while I do this. You tighten down on the cylinder, and you try not to mess the face of the lock up, but I'm going to show you one here in a second. I took off a job where it was messed up. And then you get it and you rock it back and forth like that, and you break the set screw. You release that, and then you unscrew it like this right here, and you take a screwdriver and you get the people in the door. Now, what has happened to the lock? Well, in all appearance, nothing, other than it actually broke out the screw. Now, if you can, I don't know if I can get the camera to focus in on this, probably can't. But it left part of this set screw is still in there. I don't know if you can see that or not. Hopefully you can. Part of that set screw is still sitting in there. Well, the way that you have to get that out, the way I get it out anyways, is I just take a screwdriver, a small screwdriver, and I actually just knock those two halves out. Now, or try to unscrew them actually. Hopefully I didn't botch the threads up on this. But remember, I taught you how to tap things. This is why you need to know. Because I'm going to try to get that screw out of there. And usually it didn't botch the threads up. But what I usually do anyways is I will take my tap and I will just very carefully re-tap this. Now keep in mind, this is not aluminum, it is metal. Whoops. Oh man, the real world of locksmithing. It is actually real metal. So I go ahead and of course this would be on the door. I would re-tap the hole, like this. Actually, I would usually probably put a little bit of WD-40 on it because this is actually steel. And then I would replace the set screw. Now, let me give you a little money saver tip on set screws for these. You can buy bags of these. Just find a fastener hardware store that sells them by the bulk, which is really the best way to do it, because they'll cost you a fortune at a supply house if you do. Now, knowing what size to get is really the trick on these. Now these actually work with an Allen wrench, if I can find that small Allen wrench I had laying around here. Tools, love it. What an addiction. Okay. All right, so here you go. That set screw is actually too long. Let me screw this cylinder, or a cylinder. let's use the one that we pulled out of there. It did not screw up the threads, which I'm really surprised that it didn't, because a lot of times it does. In a second, we're going to cross thread this, and then we're going to re-tap this cylinder. So I'm going to put this back in there, take this cylinder, get it started, and you do not want to cross thread it. Very thin threads. See, this is brass and this is steel, and it's very easy to cross thread these. And on the inside of this, you want on your Adams Wright lock, you don't want that cam that you can see right in, let me point at it, right in there. You don't want that cam rubbing up against this post, because what it'll do is it'll back the cam screws out after they lock and unlock the door a bunch. So here's what you want to do. You want to make sure that when you screw this in here, that the set screw that you bought is the same size as the one that was in there. You see, the one that was in this lock are actually, let me get this in focus, are actually just regular screws. These happen to be Allen wrenches. When you break an Allen wrench off in there, a lot of times it won't crack the set screw on this side. What it'll do is it'll botch up the threads, and it'll just drop out of the lock, and you can gain into that way. But see, this cylinder, I really didn't botch it up that bad. I mean, you could actually put this lock back together, and I don't like doing stuff like that, but it is what it is, right? So anyways, set screws. Buy them by the bunch. They're a whole lot cheaper that way. So you've seen how to retap the set screw in the Adams Wright lock. Now let's go ahead and put this back in the vise. And what I'm going to do is cross thread it. And man, I don't like doing that either, especially not on purpose. Or by accident. When I was a younger locksmith, I have actually botched up the threads on these things before. Just being stupid, I guess. Being young, not knowing what I was doing. But I'm going to bite down on this thing again so I can cross thread it. And then we're going to get into the HPC tap and die set and show you what it's used for. Okay, so we bite down on that. And I'm going to cross thread this on purpose. Probably easier said than done. It's when you don't want to cross thread something, you end up not cross threading it, right? But when you actually try to, then you can't. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to cross thread this on purpose. I've gotten so used to doing it the right way. All right, that bad boy, well, almost. It's hard to do, to cross thread something on purpose. Actually, in a minute I'm going to tell you why guys will usually cross thread things like this. On these Adams Wright locks, there's 2 screws on this lock. When you actually start to take the cylinder out, you want to, hang on a second. Come on, Mikey. Break that bad boy. I would say that that's a cross-threaded cylinder, buddy. You have now cross-threaded it. It's in there, but it is not in there straight. You can, I don't know if you can see this on camera, but these threads are definitely botched up, and so are the threads inside here. So what I was going to tell you is what usually causes this is you've got a hole actually in the door, and then you've got the lock itself. Well, what I always do on these Adams Wright locks, now I will tell you this, there are 2 screws that hold this lock into the door like this, or like this. That's this screw up on the top of this right here, and then there's one in the bottom that this screws into the aluminum frame of that door, of that image that you just saw earlier in the video. When you loosen this screw, some of these I've seen, especially on older doors, there's a spring in here which causes this to have some tension to it, which causes it to, hold itself in place a little bit better. If you screw this all the way out, especially the bottom one, if you screw it all the way out and this comes unscrewed from the other side of the door, what's going to happen is that spring's probably going to come off when you pull the screw out. And that spring is going to drop down inside the door. Now you got other problems. So you want to just barely loosen these screws to where this lock is sloppy in the door. Why is that? Well, so when you go to screw this into the door, what happens is, with most of the time that I've seen it where they're really stripped like I stripped this one, is because this was off center a little bit and the guy kind of put it in there sideways like that and forced it in, and that's what cross-threaded it. So you want to make sure that the lock is loose in the door, and it'll make the cylinder unscrew real easy. You don't need to take your set screw all the way out, but you need to take it out enough that it has cleared the indent in the side of this cylinder. And then when you start to unscrew it, you can have play in there, and I usually even have the bolt out to where I can move the lock this way or in and out this way to make sure when I get my cylinder in there that I'm not going to strip it. Okay, so now the lock is absolutely stripped. We have a cylinder that's stripped, and we have the lock case that's stripped. You've already seen me repair this right here. These usually don't mess up the threads too much, but it does mess up the threads, period. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this tap and die set, and we're going to use this big massive die first to repair. Be careful when you do this that you don't take your index finger and go like that and try to clean out that steel, because I have sat there with a magnifying glass and pulled little bitty pieces of metal out of my finger because I went, and I play guitar, and that's can be a real painful event. But what you want to do is take some bearing grease. It's really up to you if you want to use 3-in-1 oil. I don't particularly like that. I think bearing grease is better. You put a little bit on the inside of the lock that you're going to fix, and then you take some of this and you put it onto the tap itself. I just put it on both sides and kind of drag my finger across, because remember, these are like little saw blades on each side of these grooves that are in the tool itself. Put your bearing grease on there, and then you try not to wipe it on your pants. I might have to if I can't find a rag. Hang on a second. All right, there. Get the bearing grease off you. Now you want to make sure that it is completely flush when you do this. And the best way to do that, if the lock is an Adams Wright lock that has locking rods at the top and bottom, don't take it out of the door. If it isn't, then I usually take it out and I do this in my van. It takes you a few minutes longer, man, but if you do a good job for these people, your work will reflect it, your personality will, and you'll become a very good locksmith, and you'll have good accounts that'll use you for forever, as long as you take care of them. But looking at it from the inside of here, I can actually see if I'm straight or not, if I'm flush. So I start and rock it backwards first, to where I'm trying to find the place that this thing will seat in there and seat that cylinder. And then once you get it started, I can feel it. See, that HPC video was a good video. It showed you what the tool will do, but it didn't actually go into, I don't think, the depth that you guys really need to see. But excellent tool. And you can, like I say, you can pick these up at lockpicks.com. An excellent supplier for you to know. You say, why is this taking you so long? You're supposed to be a professional locksmith. Well, I don't know, you tell me. All right, so we want to make sure that it's straight, putting pressure on it, and get it started. What I don't want to do is cross thread the cross thread, if that makes any sense to you. And I can tell, like I say, by looking in the back of this, where this actually starts. And there it is. And I can feel it's really hard to turn. We just want to rock it back and forth, turn it a little bit, rock it back and forth. You're actually cutting threads now, right? Back and forth, back and forth, a little bit more. I'm sure you're never going to break this tap, but that's what you want to do. You want to rock it back and forth, and there you go. And that bad boy is retapped. And just take it and work it back and forth and back and forth. Like that right there. And then take you a nice dirty rag and clean this bearing grease off of here. Off your tool. Always keep your tools clean. Should I even need to say that? Okay. All right, so there you go. Now, remember what I said about your index finger. There's shavings inside here that you don't want to do this with a bare finger, or you're going to be hurting. Okay, now, the cylinder, I need to do exactly the same thing with the other tool that comes in this kit. And the way you do that, it comes with these two particular parts. One is the die itself that will actually retap this screw, or this cylinder. And we need to hold this in place. So we take our cylinder and put it in here like this, and then we take this and we clamp down on the slotted part of this, and it holds your cylinder in place. And let me, I'm going to do this way, which is going to be probably harder for me to do, but easier for you to see. All right, so as we tighten this down, now you don't want to tighten that thing down with it down where it'll interfere with the threads. You want it all the way flush. And just go ahead and just, you can feel that it's not going to move, but just get down on that baby. Tighten that sucker up. Because you don't want this to move this way. You don't want it to move at all. So just tighten it up. And that, see, I can even move it forward with my hands. Another thing you might want to do, now that I'm thinking about it, is to use some plates, like, I'm not going to do it now, but put pieces like this in each side to where you've got a flat surface instead of the indentations here. I do have plates, but they're out in the van that I actually made, that I put in my vise to hold that straight. So the cylinder is actually in there. Now I'm actually going to do the same thing with bearing grease. It's just what I choose to use. Some guys just put a couple of drops of oil in there. I don't. I would rather use bearing grease because I just think it's better. But this is brass. It's a pretty soft material, and you would do it exactly the same way. You want to get this running it backwards first, because when you run it backwards, you can sometimes feel the beginning of the thread, if I'm making any sense at all. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing and get this started. Rather tough to get it started, I will tell you that for certain. And there you go. Actually, this cylinder, to be honest with you, wasn't that stripped. That bearing grease, man, that just really makes that puppy the way it should be. But when you get these in there, take it and kind of turn it side to side as you're twisting it, to where it really cuts those threads in there good. Okay, so we're going to unscrew this. Take our dirty rag, clean our tool up, put it back, clean the bearing grease off the back of the cylinder. And then go ahead and loosen it. And then take our Adams Right lock that we have busted the set screw on, and that puppy will fit right in there and be threaded exactly the way that it should be. There you go. Doesn't get any better than that, Mama. Now, this is a cylinder that I actually took out of off a door. You can see that the locksmith that had to wrench this cylinder did a pretty gnarly job. Actually, I wouldn't leave it like that. This cylinder, it doesn't look that bad. Actually, that dent right there is when I actually dropped it before I turned the camera on. I dropped this cylinder on the floor. It was a brand new cylinder. But it left these little teeth marks in the side of it when I broke this set screw. But I would encourage you to buy this tool. Like I say, you can get them. The best price I've ever seen is at lockpicks.com. It's on your screen. They sell the tool. They've got the best price on it. And we'll see you on the next podcast.